Hi, I'm Andy Villamarzo with SBLive Sports Florida, and welcome to the seventh episode of the Coastal, our high school sports podcast. And we're going to bring on somebody that really needs no introduction, Larry Bluestein. Thank you for coming on with us. And Larry, week one presented a lot of great football, but you were down for a lot of the great games that took place down in South Florida, and it all started on Thursday night. And I mean, we got to talk about the two games. Both were really exciting. We had Milton and Western. That was a game that a lot of people were eyeing because you got one of Georgia's top ranked teams against a Western team that a lot's been said about Coach Bratkovich's team, but they really showed what they could do against Milton.
Yeah, well, they did. Unfortunately, it rained for 3 hours before the game, and the field was really muddy, so we didn't really get an opportunity to see the kid Luke Nickel, who committed to Miami, the junior from Milton. But we watched him, and but it was just muddy, and it was kind of crazy in the fact that Western lost their starting running back to Bonnie Mizell for the year with an ACL the week
Oh,
prior, and here's a kid going to Kentucky. It kind of neutralized the Western a little bit. Davy Belfort, the new quarterback, is going to Virginia Tech, came in from Gulliver. Did a really good job. Close game, could have gone either way. Western comes up with a huge win, especially because they have a week off and they play St. Thomas Aquinas and Coconut Creek back to back. So those are going to be two tough games for them, and they needed to get ready. But like I said, Melton was a really good team, and they're going to go on and they're going to do extremely well this year. Well coached athletes on both sides of the field. On that same night, the other Georgia Florida battle was kind of a game that a lot of people felt that Cedar Grove would come down, coming off 29 out of the last 32 wins. And being one of the other premier teams in Georgia that was invited to the showcase. And I'll tell you what, it was a high scoring affair. A Monarch who AJ Harrison, who's committed to the University of Massachusetts, threw for 6 touchdowns, 380 yards, and kept his team in the game all the way. And Monarch comes up with a huge win, a win that a lot of people who were picking the games never thought that they would do, and especially because the week before they came up way short against Coconut Creek in a classic. And I know those preseason classic may not mean much, but when you're neighborhood schools, it means everything, and that's the only game you're going to play. But you got to give Coach Calvin Davis and his team a lot of credit for coming back and being able to score 50 points on a night that it was pretty wet in the area. And so that's how the opening uh, two games started. Then Friday kind of was pretty interesting type of game. The Cardinal Gibbons of Raleigh, North Carolina, which sits right across the street from NC State, against Cardinal Gibbons of Florida, who's won the last three out of the last four state championships. Both well-coached teams. The North Carolina team came out on fire, didn't make a lot of mistakes, and Cardinal Gibbons, it took them almost 4 quarters to get their act together, especially because they have, a crazy schedule starting this week with chaminade-madonna. So they came from behind. Michael Merdinger, the quarterback, headed to North Carolina, ironically, came alive in the second half, did a tremendous job. Cardinal Gibbons, and you got to give the North Carolina team a lot of credit. Like I said, they came to play. They had athletes, just kind of didn't finish things up in the fourth quarter. And then across town was a really interesting game. Highland Springs, Virginia, perennial power, have won the state title 5 out of the last 8 years. Their head coach, Lauren Johnson, former Virginia Tech standout, ironically went to high school at Miramar. So it was his homecoming. And when we talked to him last week, I asked him if he has any relatives. He goes, I have three of them who live within 2 blocks of the school. So it was neat. It came down to the wire. Miramar fell short, and nothing to be ashamed of, because uh, they played a Highland Springs with a very good football team. Like I said, along with Oscar Smith and a few others in Virginia, as good as you get. And then, as you alluded to, Saturday, 11-hour day. Started off at noon on ESPN, chaminade-madonna and St. Francis Academy. Um, when Michael Van Buren, the All-American high school quarterback, went down, it kind of changed the complexion of the game. St. Francis had built up that lead 14-7. And then in the second half, Chaminade took advantage of it using Devin Gauze, who's another North Carolina commit, running the ball, although he fumbled a few times, but he still ran the ball extremely well. And then Zaquan Patterson, who committed to the University of Miami that very day, had a huge game, and Chaminade kind of fired the first shot of many, I think, because they do, without a doubt, have the toughest schedule in the country. I don't even think it's close, because think about Cardinal Gibbons, and a lot of people may slough them off, but like I said, there's a team that won 3 out of the last 4 state championships, and then they got to play Berkeley Catholic, 7th-rated team in the nation. Oh, and then they turn around and play Miami Central, and then they turn around and play American Heritage. Then they turn around and play Dillard, and then Coconut Creek. So that was a huge win for head coach Damian Jones and his team. As you saw, you were on that sideline, wilting like I was, and in that 100+ degree heat. And then the scene shifted to the game that everybody is looking forward to. St. John Bosco Prep, defending national champions, making their way 2,500 miles across the country to play a St. Thomas Aquinas team that had won 27 straight, going for a unprecedented 5th straight state championship this year. And people don't realize, if you know football, you saw one of the best teams in the country in Bosco. I mean, they well coached, big up front, talent on both sides of the ball. But that being said, that St. Thomas was in the game in the fourth quarter. It was only 10-7. And then they, a couple of plays here and there, and that's what the 27 final was. But certainly ESPN crowd, national crowd got a chance to see. St. Thomas had to replace their starting quarterback from last year, and 2 linemen and a couple of other players on defense. And I thought that they did it as well as they could with, a lot of inexperienced players. But as well as I do, they're going to be 14-1 and win it all again, because they're just really talented team. And when they're playing against Florida competition, they haven't really been touched in years. And then the nightcap was really a surprise, because St. John's was one of the teams that returned from last year. We saw them play when they got down against Chaminade 28-0, and then came roaring back, and it was a 35-28 game. And Coach Ward felt that his team, could come back this year and finish the job. But they ran against a team of fate. A week ago, Tim Lee Burrows, Love from Heritage, had a seizure, and then went into cardiac arrest on the sideline. They had to bring him back, and it really shook the team. They had to live with that the whole week. And when he showed up on Saturday, they all had his T-shirt on with, Love number 5. And I think it really inspired Heritage. And the week before, when they played Booker T. Washington and were down 7-0 with Booker T. getting ready to score, a lot of people thought, wow, this team has stepped back a little bit. But Coach Mike Smith and his team came on and won handily 45-20. And what a great 7 games. And as you said, Dr. Kevin Perry and Sean Serra, who made this thing happen. And people don't realize, I mean, there's a lot of classics and a lot of games around the country that, that are played, but this thing is a little bit different. All they require is the teams to get there. Once they get there, they put them up in hotels, feed them 3 days a week, give them paraphernalia. They either had a chance to go to one of the local places like the Jungle Cruise, which you get dinner and an opportunity to ride up and down some of the nice homes in Fort Lauderdale, or the Marlin game. And Bosco opted to go to the Miami Marlin game, figuring if they were in Los Angeles, they'd never get a seat at the Dodger game at the Marlins. Pretty much anywhere they want. So, and they all went to Dave and Buster's and ate for free, played for free. And it's a bowl game atmosphere, and it kicks off the season. And as you said, Dr. Perry kind of alluded, next year, teams like Mater Dei and Bishop Gorman are going to be 2 of the teams that they're looking forward to inviting, and they may play, and Miami Central. So they may play this over 2 weeks. with 4 games one week and then 3 the next. And because you know as well as I do, it makes for a long day when you have to play 3 games in a day. And if they want people to see all the games, instead you had to make a choice on Thursday and Friday which games you saw. So we got kicked off there, and then obviously Miami Norland going up to beat Lakeland. Kind of a
Yeah.
lot of people had heard about Norland all year or all off season. They made 19 moves. They have 14 Division I kids, 9 Power 5 kids on the roster. And you know as well as I do, I mean, Lakeland's a powerhouse. You've been there. You've seen that place. It's a tough place to play. They've only lost 6 times in the last 10 years at home. So Norland went and took care of business, beat them soundly, although we could see that even though there's a changing of the guard for the first time in 43 years in Lakeland, they're going to be pretty tough. I mean, they throw the ball well, they run the ball well, they're big, and they're well coached. But Norland comes away with a win. And the thing about Norland's victory now kind of sends a little bit of a message to Miami Central, who's in the same district, or to Booker T, who's in the same region. So it's opening day, and then throughout the state. I thought Armwood, they were 10-10 the last 2 years. They hadn't been in 500 for the last 24 years. But
Would you say that was maybe, Larry, one of the biggest surprises, or was that not a big surprise to you, Armwood beating Venice? Because I felt like, to me, when I looked on Twitter, or now it's X, so formerly Twitter, when I saw that score, it surprised me. I don't know if it surprised you.
Well, it only surprised me because it was in Venice. But I saw Armwood 3 times in the offseason. And every time I saw him, the coaches said, listen, this is no 6-14. This is no 4-16. What we have here is loaded. The kid Pringle can run the ball. They have a big line. And the thing that impresses me the most about a team like Armwood, their team GPA is 3.4. 3.4. Wow. That's pretty impressive. So he made sure that they did work in and out of the classroom. So while it surprised me a little bit, I think they hold the entire season in their own hands. Obviously, they play Tampa Bay Tech later in the year, but I think this is a team that could definitely, maybe make a solid run at getting the state. And this is, a team that most of the early 20s, 2000s lived at the state. I mean, they went to 4 or 5 in a row under Coach Callahan, and I know the coaching staff now feels they can get back. So I think that's a team that really has an opportunity to be special. I think Sanford Seminole is another team that a lot of people overlook. New coach, after Coach Lodge went up to, took a job up north, and they lost a lot of players. But I thought in their first game, they beat Edgewater in the kickoff classic, and then come back and win a huge game, where on opening day. And I think Cocoa has an opportunity to do some special things. They beat a really good Jones team, a Jones team that everybody was kind of maybe penciling in the 3M finals this year. But wait a minute, Cocoa, who won the state championship last year, they came on, they beat them. Now they host Venice, and then they go to St. Thomas. And that's the one thing, Andy, that I think a lot of the teams, in Florida have learned over the last 5 years, that if you're ever going to be considered for a national championship or in the top 5 to 6 for a national ranking, you got to play a schedule. You got to play maybe not as crazy as Chaminade's schedule, but you've got to play 3 teams that, kind of peg the meter. Because at the end of the year, if you're looking at Bosco or Mater Dei or, schools like that, and Duncanville, Texas, and they're going to come up with 5, 6 teams that really were really good. So you got to, Bishop Gorman, same thing. They host Miami Central this week, coming up on a Friday night, after scoring 121 points in 2 games. So this is there's going to be a lot of really good football the whole year. I mean, we could sit here and dissect teams, but Lake Mary with a basketball score win, Noah Grubbs, a
Oh my,
sophomore quarterback, did a great job.
unbelievable.
So no matter where you went around the state, you had some really great performances. I think Pine Forest is a team that 2 years ago, as well as I do, they should have really beaten Tampa Jesuit in the finals. They were down there. They didn't get in to score. Last year, they kind of fell flat. They lost in the first
Yeah,
round against Choctaw. They should have never done that. They were undefeated. New coaching staff this year, but same objective, a lot of good talent. So I think from the Panhandle region, I think they're going to be one of those teams. I saw Northview, who was in the finals last year, lost their opening game last week. But Hawthorne is another team. Cornelius Ingram's done an awesome job. So you've got a lot of teams that have an opportunity this year. Mainland just hurting and smarting over last year's loss to Lake
yeah,
Wales. Uh, have a great chance. I mean, Rockledge they can beat. Jensen Beach they can beat. The two teams from the West Coast and the Southwest area. They beat Dunbar last year, so it'll either be Dunbar or Fort Myers this year. So you got plenty of teams, and you got Florida High is another one. I mean, Coach Hickman's done a tremendous job. I mean, over the years, and they really could have won that game. I went into overtime. You were there. You saw against Cocoa, and
yeah.
but you look at and the large schools. A funny thing is, Popka wins 2-0, and our
Yeah.
good friend Dan LaForest is a Popka guy, and I told him, I said, there's not a team in the state of Florida who wins more ugly games than them. And I mean, last year they played Ocoee, it was 8-7. So Coach Ralston's great coach, tremendous discipline on the team, very, very talented program. Miami Columbus kind of, went over and played a veteran type of Clearwater Academy international team. I think they're
Yeah.
still going to be in the mix. Miami Palmetto kind of fired a little bit of a shot by beating Homestead, kind of showing that they may be in the race. As you mentioned before, Western is a team that everybody wants to watch, and a team that has never gotten over the hump for as long as I can remember. Came up with a big win last week as Vero Beach. I mean, they beat Miami Northwestern. Yeah, Miami Northwestern's down, but wins like that are going to help them get over the hump and, have a chance to maybe make some noise when playoff time comes. Because as we see, Venice may be vulnerable. Lakeland may be vulnerable. So anything could happen.
How about a team like St. Augustine? That was, I thought, a win over Bowles. I thought that was a very impressive win if we're looking at the Northeast Florida. And I
Right,
saw,
right.
or I was, Bowles is a team I was pretty high on from how they played last year in Class 2M. They gave Heritage a run for their money.
Yeah.
Uh, St. Augustine, I mean, do you feel like they're a team that can kind of take it up a notch in Northeast Florida?
Yeah, I do. And John Santucci and I had an opportunity to watch him during the summer over at the Villages, and they were impressive. They have some dudes, and they had that line camp, and we got a chance to watch some of their linemen. So that's a team that has an opportunity. They're always pretty good. They're always pretty good. But when you open up new schools, and they have over the last couple of decades from Ponte Vedra and Nice, and I mean Menendez and Tecoy Creek and areas like that, you think that it's going to lighten their load a little bit, but they still recruited, or still shouldn't say recruit. They still get a lot of really good programs from our kids from their area. I think another team, as you mentioned, Jacksonville Mandarin, had an opportunity to see them during the summer. They're huge up front. They're talented in the secondary. Quarterback is really, really good. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And as I said, I mean, there's going to be a lot of teams throughout the course of the year. I can't wait to see Lake Mary play. When they line up against some of these teams, that figure to be really, really good. I think there's a key game this week that maybe and West Orange beat a popular last year, so it's going to be a good game. I mean, I just think there's Edgewater, as we saw, they lost in the kickoff classic, but we'll see. They've only lost 3 times in the last 4 years, and they're itching to get back to to play for a state championship. But there's a couple of teams, as you know, that you probably could pen in to the finals. I think Chaminade, even though Cardinal Newman's much improved, but they were good last year. I just think Chaminade, as you saw, has too much firepower. I think Columbus has a really good shot. They're well coached. St. Thomas. I mean, you could say what you want. I mean, they played a big boy team the other day, and you can't minimize that. I mean and you're going to see by the end of the year that St. John Bosco is going to be either one or two, whatever they do in Mater Day. And my phone rang off the hook on Sunday with people saying, "Oh, Coco's going to beat them, Fort Myers going to beat them." Nah, ain't going to happen. St. Thomas is still very talented. Like I said, very new quarterback. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens. You got a lot of good teams. I'll tell you another team don't sleep on, and they loaded up on their schedule last year and did it again, is Treasure Coast. Coming up with a big win over Osceola to start the year out. Ironically, they ended the year in a loss to Osceola, and they started things out. But I think some of those teams that a lot of people don't have an opportunity to see. I mean, I know that golf, huge win, probably one of the biggest wins in last 30 years for that school. Better than anybody. I mean, beating Mitchell. Mitchell is kind of the king of the Nature Coast and has been for a couple of years. Coach Schmitz does a great job, but you know what? You could see it coming over the last couple of years when the new coaching staff came aboard. It seemed like that they meant business. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the whole area. I think the Tampa areas. I think we got Jesuit back in the mix again, although they have a really tough schedule. So it's going to be a really, really good year. We'll see what happens. I'm sure Venice will bounce back. But again, what happened there is the coach said, "Hey, listen, we got to play a tough schedule," and they do. And not only did they play Cocoa this week, but they got to come to Northwestern next Saturday. So,
well, a game later I was going to bring up with Venice that I feel like from week one I saw the result. Manatee going to Lake Mineola, winning 46-7, really taking care of business. And I think as well as I do, when we go and do these rankings, I got just a message about Lake Mineola and why weren't they in 3S. And I just kind of was like, well, you beat Manatee and you jump them, because I had Manatee at number 10, and Manatee holds strong with that win. Is Manatee, you feel like, a threat to Venice, because they do play each other this year?
Yeah, well, they're pretty much rivals over the last 4 or 5 years, 6 years. They've been building, and it's not easy in that area. As you said, you've got Venice, you've got Graydon River, you got Parrish, who just started, to do some things. So you got some schools in that area. And I remember back in the day when it used to be Manatee and Southeast, and the team that won that game usually won the district. But Manatee, still a large school, still a talented team. Coaching staff has been there now 6 years. So I think that they're ready to I agree with you. I think that's a program to keep an eye on. And big game this week, Largo plays Lakeland. Largo finished 9-3 last year, probably the best linebacker in the state on their team. And, they can make a little bit of a statement, just playing the game close against Lakeland. They get it at home. And there's a few teams that were in the mix towards the end of the year last year that, like we do mention Fort Myers. I mean, if they play St. Thomas close this week, it's going to give them a huge amount of confidence. A lot of those teams don't play those killer schedules. And there's a reason why. I mean, if you're a Venice, or if you're a Miami Northwestern or Central or any of the powers, you've got to up your ante. Like I said, you have to play that tougher schedule. But not so much on some of those other teams, Andy, who were just looking to get to that high water mark and maybe become, much better. It's like Armwood. Armwood, it doesn't have a challenging schedule. They did in the past, but right now, because remember, they're coming off a 2-year 10-10 record. So their objective was just to put things back in order. And once they get there and have that ball rolling, I think they're, that 1 year, I think Bloomingdale kind of, they took a couple of players from them. We always thought that, what's the name, that Strawberry Crest, when they open, may push them a little bit, but great program. It's one of the teams to keep an eye on. Like I said, the Orlando area is going to be really good. Edgewater came up with a big win over Bishop Moore. Bishop Moore is not, they're not an easy game to win, but I'm excited. I'm really excited about the season ahead. There's some really good teams. And like we said, every single game or every single week for the first 6 or 7 weeks, there's more than one marquee game.
Oh yeah, and just kind of lastly wrapping it up here, Larry. Obviously, weather becoming a main deal once again. I know last year it really kind of shuffled the schedules of many teams throughout the state, and now we got what was Tropical Storm Idalia, now it's Hurricane Idalia, and it's bearing down on our Big Bend area, and it's gonna affect the schedule because you got a lot of teams putting out there, we're postponing it to this date, canceling this game. Now teams looking for games. I guess I just throw out this question. I mean, is there anything the FHSAA or any of these leagues can do to kind of combat the weather schedule of hurricane season when it comes to just trying to avoid the bad weather?
Well, John Santucci wrote a column last year, if you remember, that he proposed to have 2 bye weeks during the season. And that way you wouldn't have to really scramble around if something happened like this. Now, we're really fortunate, I mean, in the fact that it could have hit the Tampa Bay area. It could have hit the, populated area. But it looks like where it's going to go in. I mean, although there's going to be people and lives at stake, I mean, if you go into the Big Bend area, let's say we're Cedar Key or even Apalachicola or Steinhatchee or any of those areas up there, where it comes inland, it's going to affect a whole lot less people than if it would if it came in, into northern Tampa, where you have, the Nature Coast above it, or if it went in around Bradenton or Sarasota, where you have Tampa Bay above it. So I think for the most part, what's going to happen, because remember, these schools aren't practicing either. So what's probably going to happen is they're going to try to get it at a later date, or have to do what they did last year when you had Hurricane Ian, where they were doubling up and playing, a Monday, then come back and play a Thursday, or, and that's what's going to have to happen. But I think what John proposed is perfect. Start your kickoff classics on the 12th, start your season on the 18th, and then, go that way. And each team will have 2 bye weeks, one maybe early, one in the latter part of the season. This way, if something happens like that, their opportunity to schedule will be a lot easier. And, I mean, and if it goes, if it's out of the realm, after the 2 bye weeks, then it wasn't meant to be. But I think that they should at least try that. They're, and no one really mentioned it. I think they kind of blew John off, which is not right, because I mean, it sounds like a really good idea. I mean, if a team like here, Central, they had a bye week 1, so now they have to play 11 straight weeks or 10 straight weeks. Same thing with like schools like Plantation, or schools that had that first week off. Now they got to turn around and play straight through. So if you had, like, let's say, this first week off, and you have another one in week 7, then you're more apt to be able to make up a game later in the year, or after week 4. See, there's a thing too, what they do in Miami-Dade County now. This is coming up on the 3rd year. They have what they call GMAC week, and it's a county week. It's like, the athletic association that all these teams are members of, and they play that 1 week. They seed them 1 through whatever it is, 35, 40, and they play that 1 week. So what could happen is you maybe earmark a week statewide, like week 8, everybody's off. Week 2, everybody's off, something like that, so and that's when you can utilize those days. And I agree 100% with you.
Yeah, and when I read John's column last year, it definitely made a lot of sense, and it's something that definitely to be looked at and
Yeah,
really implemented in the future. Just because of, I mean, things like right now, situations like right now where you
sure.
have to kind of scrambling, trying to figure out how they're gonna fill that 10th game or where they're gonna put that game because some of them may not have any bye weeks left because they opened up the season with a
Yeah,
bye.
yeah, you're right. So, and so the only way to combat that is you're going to have to play 2 games within 4 days. And that's not easy, but I mean, that's the only way they're doing it now. They're turning around. You saw last year there was what 5 weeks of schools playing on a Monday or a Tuesday, and but that's the only way you can do it now. But I think that somebody, in the FSAA should listen to the schools and understand. I mean, they've only had storms here for a million years, so I mean, it's not like something that just popped up over the last year or so. But we're feeling it a little bit more. So I'm excited as you are about the season, and I just wish everybody well. And anytime they need to ask us any question, you can do it. We're on Twitter at Larry Bluestein, and same thing. You just go to LarryBluestein.com and read about Dayton Broward or our prep red zone stuff, which is pretty good. We do a lot of profiles, and we have Shannon and Andrew doing a lot of stuff in the Tampa Bay area and in the middle of the state. So yeah, everything's going along good. And as you know, we have our radio show every Monday and on WQAM, and we not only hit the local, but we hit everybody. We've had
Yep.
you on, we've had Josh on, and so we're excited about that. And I appreciate you doing all the work you do and for having us on.
All right. Well, Larry, thank you for coming on. And I mean, it's an exciting season coming up. We got a lot of storylines that are obviously going to play out and a lot of roads to, well, FHSA hasn't exactly said where the state championships are going to be, but I guess we'll assume Tallahassee for the smaller classifications, Fort Lauderdale once again for the larger.
Yeah,
And
I'd like to see it all move to Orlando. I really will. It's centrally located, so that going, when you have Chaminade having to go 459 miles to play a state championship game, that's crazy. I mean, now Orlando is, and it's a hub. If you're in Pensacola, you could fly there. It's not expensive. There's always hotel rooms for $60. So you having it in South Florida, especially that time of year, you can't get a hotel room. It's impossible. It's just like in the Venice area during the winter time. I mean, the hotels that I stay at during the summer that are like $80 or $350. So I mean, so you have to also look out. But I think Orlando, from the standpoint of proximity, affordability, and they could have. I mean, we saw it at the soccer stadium. That would be awesome. But the Inter Miami is all aboard to have it back again. Now that they're making all that money with Messi. So, but
well,
that's it.
all right. Well, Larry, thank you so much for coming on with us, and we'll definitely talk
Anytime,
again
Andy. Anytime.
season.